Hi, I'm Mari Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness. I am an author, a speaker, and a workplace well-being strategist. Do you work in a dive hive or do you work in a live hive? I'll bet you've had an experience in working in each. But what does it really mean to create a workplace where employees are engaged, where businesses are profitable, and where both the workplace and the employees can thrive? Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you, tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Well, what if you worked in an environment where everyone was abuzz to just be there? What could that create? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook group, so go on over there, find Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please go over to wherever it is you listen to podcasts and rate, review, subscribe to the show. And hey, you might as well share it with your friends. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Lancaster, Philadelphia, to Colorado, to Philadelphia, even to Washington, D.C. You can find us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Do you have Spotify, maybe Google Home, maybe Alexa? You can simply say, play Dov Baron Podcast, and you'll get it there too. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, a leader in sales, or in any capacity, you know that how important the work environment is. You know that we all have to be conscious of that. It's shifted. It's changed a lot from what it was even as little as 10 years ago. We now understand the value of creating a culture where people are engaged. Engagement numbers are at a record low. And now what are we going to do about it? What can you do about it? Well, let's find out together, because my guest on this episode is Mari Ryan. Mari Ryan leverages over 30 years of business experience in various backgrounds, including marketing, consulting, executive roles across a variety of different industries. Today, she is the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness, and she is an expert in worksite well-being. She is the founder and former board chair for Worksite Wellness Council of Massachusetts and is a member of the board of directors of Health Promotions Advocates. She serves as on the advisory board of Global Women for Wellbeing. I keep having problems with two words that go with well. An active member of the National Speakers Association. And on top of that, Mari is the author of the book, Thriving Hive, How People-Centric Organizations Ignite Engagement and Fuel Results. On top of that, the book recently won a National Business Award. Please help me welcome Queen Bee of Engagement, Mari Ryan. Welcome, Mari.
Thanks, Dov. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We're blessed to have you here. It's cool. Now, before we jump in, I always like to ask my guests, tell us somebody maybe it's somebody we wouldn't even know, but somebody who has really been a major influence in your life, somebody who's had a positive impact.
Well, I'd actually say it was two people. It was a husband and wife, and they were my Girl Scout leaders when I was a kid. I became a Girl Scout when I was 6 years old and continued through scouting until I was in my mid-20s when I was volunteering and giving back. But in my formative teen years, I had the opportunity to be part of a troop that was led by this husband and wife. They were both teachers, and we did amazing things, and I really learned a lot from them about leadership, about being able to try things that I had thought I wouldn't have been able to do, and to have confidence in trying things that might be a little bit risky.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love asking that question because invariably, there's a cool story with it, and and it's the kind of stuff we don't put on our resumes. We don't even think about putting it on our resumes, and but it's actually at the root of why we're doing what we're doing. That those people, whoever they were, in this case, people running a scout troop, have such power and influence, and it's just a wonderful reminder for me and for our listeners to say, hey, you know what, you're having impact, even if your name is not at the front of my book, if your name is not even mentioned on the stage, you are part of the blueprint of how I became the leader I am. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Now, your new book is it's not a traditional business book. I mean, like I said, it just won this business book award, but Thriving Hive is actually an allegory. So tell us why you chose to go with an allegory rather than this is step one, this is step two, which, by the way, we're all a bit bored with anyway. So
yes, well, there you go. There's your answer right there. I didn't even have to say it, right? Now, when you think about how we learn and the ways in which we really transfer information in powerful ways, it's through story. And it's as long as human beings have roamed this planet, stories have been the way in which information has been meaningfully transmitted. And I just found that it was one that I'd never written a book before, so I thought, which is going to be harder, making up a story or finding all the facts and figures and information that I needed to be able to write a traditional business book. And I just wanted to do something different. Mm-hmm. And that was the reason I chose writing it in the parable or fable format. And it was really fun to do. It's set in a beehive. It's actually set in 2 beehives. Right. And I really didn't know much about bees. So I had to do a lot of studying and research to learn about bees and how beehives work and all the things that made it a great metaphor for the workplace. It's a system. And it was a way to be able to represent the workplace as a system with workers, bees.
Very cool. I mean, I think that it's interesting because, and I want to come more into it in a moment, but I'm glad you just said what you said, which is that you had to go do your research, because when we first talked about it a year ago, the first thing that comes to mind for me, and maybe for many of our listeners and viewers, is, well, bees are they're actually called drone bees. They're drones. They just do their thing, but they're not really got much of a life. And your book is actually about, no, this is actually how to have a life. So it was, I thought it was a very interesting metaphor in that context, in that the way we see bees is that actually they don't have a life. Their job is just to feed the fat queen, who might be XYZ corporation. So it's an interesting metaphor for me because it goes completely 180 on how we perceive it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, what I was really trying to do was to create the story in a way that first brought the bees to life, gave them personality, and created the storyline, because there are two different hives that I'm describing here, in comparing this in workplaces to the dive hive, where I'm sure all of us have had experience working at some point in time, and the alive hive. Mm-hmm. And the idea of with bees, they have an assigned job, and typically they keep that job throughout their life. And the idea was to show that the ways in which a system functions, which is what bees do in their hive, is they function in a way and they communicate in a way where it just all works. They work together as a team, everyone's doing their jobs, they're accomplishing what they set out to do in that individual role that contributes to the way the system functions as a whole. And that's really how we want to see workplaces running. But there's some elements of the contrast of the alive hive and the dive hive that really make up the story of why they're very different and why they represent what our experience might actually be in the workplace.
Absolutely. Now, there has been a significant movement with even national and even international conferences towards the awareness of doing business that is not just got profit at the focus, at the center of it, where employee wellness and overall impact on local and even global communities, that has grown enormously. There's more and more organizations using not the same kind of bee, but still becoming bee corporations.
Right.
Tell us how that ties into the book's theory about the workplace and the busy hive, the thriving hive versus the dive hive, which is certainly less healthy.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, Doug, because the idea that is, really becoming much more prevalent in business today, and not just in businesses, that governments are looking at this, is how do we look after the well-being of the people? Because we all know that regardless of whether it's in the setting of our communities or the setting of our businesses or organizations, whatever that professional organization might be, we can't achieve our goals without the people. It's a very clear fundamental piece. Your business doesn't function without the people, and you can't achieve your business objectives without the people. So we need to be caring for those people in a way that shows that we appreciate them, that we honor that the work that they do that has value, and that it's not just about profits, as you mentioned. It's really about how we create a purpose in that organization for people to really care about that purpose, work towards that purpose, and contribute through that purpose to a greater good not just in that organization, but in the community as well.
So, yeah. Now, you mentioned it there several times, and I think that the work that we do with individual leaders and with corporations is actually around purpose and finding their purpose. What's your guidance to the companies that the organizations you're working with in that context, in why purpose matters, and how do you suggest that they step into finding that? Because a lot of times, in my experience, companies think they have a purpose, but what they really have is a mission statement with a lick of paint. So,
right, yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, purpose is really so very important. And the way that I portray this in the book with the dive hive versus the alive hive is, in the dive hive, the purpose is profit. So yes. Queen Cruella is driving her troops to be able to produce profit and to create enough honey that they can sell, and it's all about profit. When in reality, we know that profit can often be an outcome. But when profit is the goal, that's when we get, I would say, in some ways, misdirected. You may have heard a little bit in the last year or so from a letter that came out from Larry Fink, who's the chairman and CEO of the Blackstone Investment Group. Mm-hmm. And he had some very important guidance to, this is one of the largest investment organizations on the planet in terms of the money that they manage. And what he was referring to in his letter was this idea that purpose, the sole purpose, is not about profit, but it's about that is a force for which we can contribute to the greater good. And that profits is a way, we don't want it to be inconsistent with purpose, because certainly profit is important, but it's not the main goal. We want to be able to create a purpose that is going to give meaning to the work that people do, that when you hire people into your organization and when you're trying to engage those people, that they can feel connected to that purpose. That it's
Absolutely.
not just creating profit to put in shareholders' pockets, but it's contributing to the betterment of the world in general. And that's when people will come to your organization. That's when they'll be engaged in your organization. And that's when they will stay in your organization.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Because, of course, old school versus new school. Old school was bottom line first. New school tells us that what we have to do is take care of our people first, employee engagement. And talk to us about, from your research and what you found in the work that you've done, how do you see that employee engagement in a thriving hive shifts the bottom line results? What are some of the meat and potatoes around that people can grab a hold of?
Well, we're actually starting to see increasing research that's showing us that there's a real direct connection to this. So if we think about engaged employees, these are the people who are interacting with your customers, creating your products, your services, and delivering to your customers. We've all had some really lousy customer experience in our lives that we repeat hundreds of times to anyone that will listen. And those experiences, that's part of the brand that is established for that organization. And I think about this. I've been traveling a little bit more lately for business than I have in the recent past. And it's interesting because I've been having what just seemed like extraordinarily positive customer experiences. And I think, this is a sign to me that organizations are really caring for their people because it translates directly to customer service. And when we have those positive customer experiences that the employees deliver, then I'm going to come back. I'm going to buy again. I'm going to tell my friends. So just from the pure customer perspective, it definitely translates to the bottom line. But if we think about it more from the talent management perspective, we think about when you're recruiting and hiring people, it can take a long time and cost a lot of money to hire the right people. And if they don't stay, then there's even more cost. The cost of turnover and retention is something that most organizations measure. And all of that is truly directly measurable. But at the engagement piece, we see this from the perspective when employees, and Gallup's done a bunch of research around this topic, of the relationship between employee engagement and employee well-being. Because this translates to productivity, it translates to fewer sick days, and we're hoping that we're going to continue to see emerging research where we're going to see that it may even translate to long-term reductions in healthcare costs.
So talk to us a little bit more on that. Let's take a sort of little bit deeper dive there. Talk to us about the relationship between when well-being, like employee well-being versus, how does that lead to engagement? But let's go a bit deeper into when you say employee well-being. Let's sort of remove the jargon of that for the people listening and going, well, what does that mean?
Sure. Let's define that first. That's absolutely an important place to start. When we're talking about well-being, we're thinking about a model that is, it's a fairly holistic or broad model in that when we think about wellness, so wellness is the word that probably everybody thinks about. Everybody's known about wellness for decades. And most organizations are doing some sort of wellness programs for their workforce. Sure. Most of those programs and the tradition around those programs has been that they've been focused around physical health. So it's, how much sleep do I get and how many steps do I take a day and how much do I weigh and do I use tobacco and what am I eating and am I using, not using drugs or alcohol or, Sure. those kinds of things. So it's been predominantly focused around physical health. Absolutely. But in the last 5 years or so, and again, there's increasing research around all of this, that there are additional dimensions that we need to consider beyond just our physical health. So these would be things like, and this is one we're hearing a lot about these days, is financial well-being. I think we all know that if we have some element of our financial life that's out of whack, and we're struggling in some way in that financial part of our life, that is a lot of stress, and it impacts us tremendously. You look at lower wage workers who may have to work two jobs just to make ends meet or to earn a living wage. That's very stressful for those individuals, and it takes a toll on their health. So the financial well-being is a key piece. But then we also want to look at the extent that people have connections in their lives. Do they have people that they can call on in time of need? Do they have connections not only with their colleagues in the workplace and have positive relationships, but with their family and in their community? And then community is another element of this, because community goes in the workplace. We think of community as those connections, a place I feel like I belong. But in the context of the bigger world, do I live in a place where I feel safe? Do I have connections in my community? So community and connection, I think, really go together pretty well. And then the last piece is purpose. So this is the purpose at the individual level. Do I have a purpose that motivates me to get out of bed and get excited every day about doing something? And that can, again, tie back to the purpose of the organization. This is often why when we see not-for-profit organizations or mission-driven organizations, their people are really passionate about the work they do because they feel a connection to the purpose of that organization or the mission of that organization. So we kind of think of purpose being at the center. And we hear so much today about, in particular, younger generations, the millennial generation, really looking for meaningful work that has purpose and connection for them to their values, their personal values.
Absolutely.
So when we think about well-being, we're looking at it much more broadly.
Right.
So let's tie that back to your question about, so what does that mean in the workplace? And how do we think about that in the workplace? Well, let's go to the connection piece. Everybody wants to feel like they belong, right? That's an innate sense of who we are as human beings. We want to feel like we fit in and we belong. And when organizations really care about people, have practices and policies in the workplace where they demonstrate caring, where they do social things together, where people feel like they can have fun and be their authentic selves, that's when people will really feel connection to both the workplace and to their colleagues. So it creates that environment that they really feel like, hey, I really like being here every day.
Yeah, I think that's a point that is so often missed, particularly in generations that are older than millennials, is I'm in that age bracket, obviously. So, we approached work as not whether I want to like or want to be here, but does it pay me well enough to have a lifestyle? And what I love about millennials, absolutely love about millennials, is they go, who gives a crap? I want to know if I'm going to be miserable every day.
Right.
Because if you pay me enough money for a lifestyle that I can't enjoy, then why am I here? And I love that about millennials. That makes me stand up and applaud them, because they get that my life, my generation were basically told, work in the last 11 years of your life, you can have a life. Oh, so I'm worn down to the bone. I'm physically, mentally, emotionally drained. And now I've got enough money to enjoy the last 11 years of my life. So I got to enjoy the first 5 to 10 years, and I get the last 11, provided I last that long, when in fact, the statistics show that people die on average 7 years after retirement. Oh, so you live for about 14 years. Ooh, that sucks. And I love that about millennials, is they get that. They get, no, hold on. I want to have a good time while I'm at work and still produce. And I think that in the mind of an older age bracket, we tend to say, well, if you're having fun, you're not at work. And if you're at work, you're not having fun. Well, and I think what you're talking about in this wellness and well-being in a context that includes all of these 7 categories is that, like, how do we bring that together? And I really love that. So in that context, Murray, how do you get that across to that generation who have been, my generation were incredibly indoctrinated with this nonsense. How do you get them across that line to grasp this idea of holistic wellness for their people and how that adds to their bottom line and their values, because in their brain it's still, this is work.
Well, it's so interesting to have to think about how to make that shift in the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and we don't want to have to wait. I hear these stories all the time, and it just makes me crazy, is we hear these stories about a senior executive who's had a heart attack or a near-death experience, and suddenly they get the religion around why living life today and having every moment be meaningful and joyful. Why do we have to wait for people to, have those kinds of horrible experiences for us to be able to get that we only have the moment we're living in today? Tomorrow is a gift if we get it. And we have to really be able to start to encourage people to think about the importance of living today, being able to create the conditions in the workplace where everyone can be their best, where we can all show up being, joyful, engaged, happy, glad to see our colleagues, willing to contribute as part of our team. And all of that translates directly to the bottom line, because it makes for an environment where people want to work. No doubt you've had some sort of job experience where you worked in the Dive Hive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about reflecting, and I'm sure our audience has all had that experience. At
At
some point, we've all had those jobs where, Sunday night rolled around and you started to get anxious about going to work on Monday morning.
Right.
That's not healthy. That's not good for anybody. And it's not good for the employer either, because those people are the ones that are showing up that are disengaged. They're not doing a good job. They're not providing the quality of service that they can to you, to the organization or to your customers. Nobody benefits in that.
No, not at all. You're absolutely right. So let's talk about something that I think was maybe an in-between bridge, and I want to talk to you about it because I believe that you tried this in-between bridge and discovered it didn't work. And I am actually avidly saying to my clients, please get rid of this idea. So, but maybe you have a different thought. What are your thoughts on open door policy, where the door is open and your people can come to you and tell you what their challenges are? How do you feel about that?
Well, having managed lots of people throughout my career, I'm absolutely all for this in many ways, because communication is one of the fundamental elements of creating a culture of well-being. And when we talk about communication, it's that ability to be open and have transparency within the way that communication is handled within an organization, so that it's not just top down, that it's not just, directive from a hierarchy, that it's communication that can go both ways between the people providing input to the organization about what's working and what's not working, as well as having, at the individual level, having employees come to you and be able to talk about, what's working and what's not working. I hear stories all the time about, the only time a manager or an organization finds out that, something wasn't working for an employee is in the exit interview. Well, shouldn't we know a little bit more about what's going on before they're ready to pack up and walk out the door? First off, that's costly to the organization. It's disruptive to the organization, and it's disruptive to the individual's life. Whereas if we can talk to each other and understand what the needs are, and I've had this happen with my own team, where somebody might have been struggling with something and I didn't know it until until I finally, we had a conversation about it, and it was like, all we've got to do is talk this through and figure out what the solution is going to be that's going to work for both the individual and for the organization. So I believe that, and we see this so much more, this is why we've seen the death of the, annual appraisal, performance appraisal kinds of things, because you can't wait till once a year to talk to people. You've got to be talking to people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
My team has weekly team. We have a Monday morning team huddle, right? Get together Monday morning, connect, know what's going on. What are the key things people are dealing with? Where you need help? so that there's this ongoing flow of communication.
But, the challenge with the, I love what you just said, because the challenge with the open door policy is that it actually, where I balked against it, and I think you do too, is that it allows leaders to be passive. I'm going to sit here in my high office and my door is always open. You can always come and talk to me. No, I can't. Why? Because there's a force field there. You're the boss, I'm not. Yeah. I can't just walk in. And so it doesn't quite work like that. And and leaders go, well, and they come out every meeting and say, my door is always open. So what? You had talked about, you and I had talked about how, that was something that you had to learn for yourself, was that you were waiting for them to come.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
This is what this is what I think that leaders fool themselves, is that, they say, oh, well, my doors are, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Nobody's coming through the door. And we get that.
Part of the challenge is that we've had this hierarchical structure that exists
absolutely
for forever. And, with that hierarchical structure comes power, comes boundaries, and people don't feel like they can cross those boundaries. And as long as those boundaries exist, people aren't going to feel like they can initiate the conversation. You're right. I think a force field is a great description for this. That was very well put. It's this, there's this the door may be open, but there's still a wall there.
Yeah, you can't cross it.
True. Right.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. To me, and this is what I actually described in the Alive Hive, is the role that leaders play to be visible within their organization, to be walking around, to be approachable, so that people feel that the leaders are human beings just like the rest of us. Absolutely. And they have challenges. Everybody has challenges, issues. But if we can't have that open communication, then we're never going to succeed.
No. Well, you and I are not 25 years old. We grew up in an older. Sorry, maybe you are. I'm not, for sure. Anyway. But and as I said, we didn't grow up with the millennial mentality we may have, but not indoctrinated in the way it is now, which is wonderful. What was the turning point in your life, in your business philosophy, that got you to shift around and come at this from a very different point?
Well, it became very clear over a period of time that I was not living in alignment with my values. And the situation was that I was traveling as a consultant. I was living on the road 100% of the time for almost 2 years. So I had 3,000-mile weeks and I had 6,000-mile weeks. And I was hardly ever home. I was only home like every other weekend. I had no relationships in my communities. My friends never knew when or if I was going to be around. And I just recognized that this was not the life that I wanted to live, that I really wanted to be more grounded in my home, in my community. I wanted to have relationships in my community. And, I just really wanted to have a life that had much more balance to it, because all I was doing was working and living away from home. And that's when I said, you know what, this life sucks. I'm going to do something about this. And that was actually about, now it's about 16 years ago. And I made a complete career change as a result of it.
So I think that I'm pretty certain that there are many of our viewers and our listeners who may be feeling something very similar to that, in that they are feeling, I'm out of alignment here. This is not working for me. But it doesn't, because we get so entrenched into that hamster wheel, it doesn't feel like there's anything I can do. I mean, I've got the mortgage, I got the kids, I got somebody in college, whatever it might be. I got debt. I've invested 20 years in this career or 10 years in this career, and I don't, now what? What would be your guidance to somebody who's in that position, Mary? What would you say to them?
Well, I think the important thing is to recognize that we choose our path. It is up to us to choose that path. And some of us, I I can say I'm, probably one of those people who, said, well, if somebody had asked me when I was 19 years old or 20 years old, what was my career going to be, it was completely different than where I ended up.
Sure.
And I think it's important to feel like we can choose that path.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also important to recognize, starting with values, what are the things that are important to you? And then focusing on understanding what your strengths are and how to leverage those strengths. So when I made this career change, I wasn't giving up the career I'd had working in business. I've spent my entire career in business since I was 19 years old. Well, I wasn't going to give that up. I was going to leverage that to be able to use all of the skills and knowledge that I have and just use it in a different way. And the other thing I would say is don't be reluctant to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
All too often people say, oh, I've got to go this alone, or I've got to, read the right book or take the right course. And those can be helpful ways to do this. I actually worked with a coach when I got home at the end of those 2 years on the road and said, this life sucks. I hired a coach to work with and worked with that coach for years.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a few years to get to the place where I knew that this was the work I was going to do for the rest of my career. But it was so important for me to have help to be able to clarify my skills, my strengths, understand how I had gotten my jobs in the past and how my work came to me. And all that was so meaningful. So ask for help.
Yeah, I think that is part of the problem when we say, well, I've invested 20, 10, 15, whatever it is, years in this thing. And, I've got a mortgage and I've got bills. And that's the loop, right? I've got a mortgage, I've got bills, I've got to keep doing it. But I got to get out, but I can't get out because I got mortgage, I got bills. And I think what you said is very important, which is that you got to ask for help. And if you say I can't afford help, then you're just digging a grave.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that is, if you have to work an extra hour so you can pay for that coach, for that therapist, for that guide, for that mentor, that whoever it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's being able to have, my line from my teachings is no one is objective in their subjective reality. I don't care how smart you are. I'm a pretty smart individual. I've been doing this a long, long time. I do not have the ability to be 100% objective in my subjective reality. And every now and then, my wife brilliantly reminds me of that. It's true. I mean, because we
She's
can't.
right.
She's absolutely right. Of course she is. So there's no way to fully do that. And so that is, if there's a part of us that's feeling like that, that is what we have to do. So I think that's great guidance. Mm-hmm. You have challenged yourself throughout your life, and like you said, you've jumped careers, you've gone off and done different things in order to take yourself to your best. But one of the things you did was you climbed Kilimanjaro. You climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was a really fun experience in that my motivation for doing it was kind of the metaphor for midlife. I was turning 50 years old and I thought, I really need to challenge myself and do something that's big. And this felt big. And I had also known a number of people who had successfully and some not successfully, summited at on Kilimanjaro. But one of the things that also motivated me, in the town that I live in, there's a local tour company that specializes in trips to Tanzania. And they had done a video of their 12-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old boy from the local area in Tanzania around Kili. And they climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And I thought, well, if a 12-year-old can do it, why can't I?
Right.
And it was for most of it, it was like a long walk. We were on the mountain for 8 days. We summited on day 7. And most of it was like a long walk until the next to last day when we climbed 4,000 feet, at an incredible, vertical pitch. And it was like walking uphill in sand. You'd move forward and slide back a little and move forward and slide back a little. And it felt like it was going to take forever. And of course, you're having difficulty breathing. And so it was a great metaphor for challenging myself and for trying something that was really different and outside of my comfort zone. And I carried a little sign with me that I still have hanging here in my home that is, it said, I can do anything. And my photo, my solo photo on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro is with that little sign that says, I can do anything.
That's awesome. That's cool. What a great metaphor.
Thanks.
What was one thing you did for a long time that actually blocked you from your success?
Just one? Okay, let me think about that for a second.
Because we've all done things, right?
Yeah, well, I think, we talked a little bit earlier about, not living in alignment with my values, so that work, that work experience where I was out of alignment was one. And I think the other thing we alluded to a little bit earlier was when working with my team was waiting for people to come to me with their, we talk about that with the, the open door kind of policy. But for me to recognize that I really had to be supportive in a way in working with my team, to be going to them and asking them what they needed. How could I help them? What was going to make things easier for them? And really showing them that I cared in a way that was caring about them as the person. And that made a huge difference. And I think it, if you asked anybody who worked for me, that, when I came to that realization and we were able to establish both some practices and just deepen our relationships as a result of that, it changed everything for us. And for me too, because it really made me feel like I'm now here to help them. It's that servant leader kind of role, is I'm here to help you. It's not the other way around.
Yeah, I fully agree. What are you presently most curious about? What do you find yourself most curious about?
Oh, again, only one thing. It's so hard. I don't know. I think for me right now, it's probably the curiosity is around the transitions that we make in life. And when we start to, aging is certainly an element of that, how we make transitions or choose transitions in our lives, whether those are career, in our living situations, in our relationships, just how we go through those transitions. And then how, in some cases, and I think everybody who's been through any major life transition knows this, how sometimes we come out differently on the other side. And just what that all means for us and how it shapes who we are as people.
Yeah. Some people go through kicking and screaming and some don't. And I think the more you go through kicking and screaming, the more likely you are to be completely transformed by it.
Well, and then, at the same time, we watch people who seem to just glide through life and go through every transition without, and you just wonder, was it really that easy, or are they just not really sharing with us that it was really hard for them, and they just not being as transparent about what it was really like for them? So it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Let's move into our lightning round. Are you good for that?
Sure.
All right. So in our lightning round, let me ask you, you are asked to write a single question. Only one question. It's a question that everybody will have to answer. It's the final question on life's test. So you're about to check out from life and you get to ask one question of everybody who's ever going to live. What is the final test question for life?
What's most important for you?
Well, they're already on the way out.
It's still important. Still, I think it's still a valid question. What's most important for you?
Okay, cool. Thank you. In a time where we live in a society where people are, at this time, very focused on politically correct and not saying the wrong thing, leadership requires us to step out. What is your bravest opinion?
That we should respect and honor every person's choice in whatever they do in life and whatever their opinions are and whatever path they choose. It's not for us to judge what their choice or their path is.
Very cool. What makes Mari Ryan cry?
Parades.
Parades, really?
parades. I love a parade, but it always brings tear to my eyes. I don't know why.
That's fascinating.
Isn't that funny? I know.
What makes you cry laughing?
Oh, a really good hysterical movie will make me, when I'm really laughing, enjoying something that's takes me out of the moment that I'm in and just takes me to wherever those characters are going.
What is there a particular movie? Is there one that for you works?
I happen to like animated movies. So they tend to be, children, geared towards children, but, there's just a variety of animated movies that I enjoy.
Yeah, my wife and her friend like to go to those. Like she loves those too, the
Yeah.
kids movies, and
Yeah.
they go together, date the two girls, and off they go. And sometimes they'll take my granddaughter, but often not, because she won't enjoy it quite as much as they do. I don't.
That's right. That's right.
Very
I don't
cool.
think. Yeah, I often think those movies are just way too deep for kids. That they're really intended. There's much deeper stories that kids just don't get.
What I don't think that we often consider this enough, but how do you see that your childhood had an impact on who you've become as a leader? And I want to be clear in saying that I don't expect people to say wonderful or terrible things. What I expect them to say is their truth. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we had horrible things that made us a great leader because we've transformed it. Sometimes we had wonderful things that actually made us a terrible leader, and we had to transform that. So it's not either or. What was something that really impacted you that's transformed or helped you to sit in your leadership skills today?
Well, it goes back to actually one of your first questions about who influenced my life. And
Right.
It's interesting for me to be able to say that the leadership experiences that I have been able to work through in my life started when I was, a young teen in the scouting program, and gave me opportunities to try things, to actually be in leadership roles at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be a leader amongst my peers at a young age. And I think if it had not been for that experience, because I think back on my high school experience, like I wasn't in the in crowd, and I finished second. I was the runner-up in everything. I was the backup person on the sports team, and I was the backup person on the cheerleading squad, and I wasn't in the group that was out excelling.
Right.
Or in the perceived way that we might have in that time in my life. And I'm also a late bloomer. So I think it took me a little while to kind of get to the place where I felt like I really had the confidence to be able to leverage all of those learning experiences in a way that would let me lead with confidence.
That's interesting. I don't know if I mentioned to you in a previous conversation, but my hobby is gardening. I love gardening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always excited for spring to arrive because the flowers, and it's so beautiful. But there are certain plants in my garden that just become green, and that's all they are. And by the time they get their bloom, which lasts a long time,
Right.
all the early spring flowers are gone.
Right.
And it's fascinating to me because it's the excitement of the new flower, but it's actually the late blooms that last the longest. And I just love that metaphor, and I've used that metaphor with other people. It's like, even with young kids that I've worked with, and saying, it's actually might be a bit better to be a late bloomer, because I know the kids who were super popular when I was at school, they've all faded into oblivion. And when I went back to visit, they were all like, "Oh my God, like, you completely changed." No, I just came in, late bloomer, as you said. And I think that's,
Right.
I think when you're a late bloomer, you also realize that you can't compete with the new bloomers. So you might as well just settle into it and go, okay, what do I got? What is it that I can bring? That's a great point. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Tell us something that you learned very recently, maybe in the preferably last 48 hours, but it could be a bit longer. What's something that you learned that's maybe awakened you a little?
Well, I've had this sort of revelation, I guess it is, in the last, not only I have it every morning when I wake up, I moved my house a week ago, and I downsized. So I went from a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home to a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home. And every day I am learning what it means to live in a smaller space, to live with fewer possessions, and in some ways to feel very light about that, is less things to maintain and pay for, and all of that stuff. And it's just so interesting to, this is actually one of those life transition kinds of points. Absolutely. Where I'm feeling like I'm learning every day as I live in a place with a different footprint and, whole different way to think about my space. And personal space is so important, especially I'd lived in the same place for 26 years. Mm-hmm. So changing personal space wasn't anything I had done recently. So it's been a real interesting learning experience for me.
That's very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So as we come to the close of the show, one of the things I like to ask my guests is, it's easy for this, podcasts are something that people listen to in cars, are often passive. And I'm not interested in making this into a distraction. I think that we have a responsibility on this show to make sure that what people leave with is something that is not just inspirational, but practical. Mm-hmm. What is it, if you could give a piece of guidance, a piece of direction, if you could have the people listening, viewing, get something really practical about this, what is the one thing you would say to them, go do this in order for everything we've talked about to make sense? Go do this in the next 24, 48 hours, whatever it might be.
Well, it would be that same question we would ask that person on the way out. What's important for you? What are the most important things in your life? And that, sort of think about it from the values perspective. Are you living your values? And are you living the life that is really foundationally based on those values? So many times we get, as I was when I was out of whack with, living on the road for 2 years, many of us have times in our lives where we are spending too much time working, not enough time with the people we love, not doing the things we really enjoy most, and really being clear about what's important to you, and then figuring out how to make time for that in your life. Because it's always fascinating to me to see how people do make time for the things that are important.
That's absolutely true. Thank you. That was wonderful. Mary, it's been a pleasure. Please tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, about your book, and about all the wonderful resources that you offer.
Well, they can find more about me and my company at our website. The company name is Advancing Wellness, and our website is advwellness.com. And there's lots of information on how to reach us there, all our links to social media. We can find us on a lot of different social media platforms. And my book, The Thriving Hive, How People-Centric Workplaces Ignite Engagement and Fuel Results, is available on Amazon and from other booksellers. It's available in paperback, in Audible, and in ebook formats.
Fabulous. Thank you. Well, like I said, we will, of course, repost all those links. We'll make sure that those are available on the show notes, along with the social media links to Mari's materials. Again, Mari, thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure and honor. And I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, dear viewer, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes on Dov Baron's Leadership Podcast page on Facebook. To find out more about me, Dov Baron, and about hiring me as a speaker or strategist for your organization, you can simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. You can also find more access to my books and my programs, and of course, this podcast if you choose to go there. Be aware, though, that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the same challenges of spending way too much money, time, energy, attracting, training, and developing top talent. only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you are frustrated with investing in training and development of your talent, only have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. Going through the purpose elicitation process can transform your business. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. Thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about whether you are part or running a thriving hive or a dive hive. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.